want to bring in White House correspondent MaryAlice Parks and investigative reporter Katherine Faulders to unpack this a little bit more. Katherine, the committee showed that draft tweet from former President Trump that appears to show that he planned to march to the Capitol ahead of time. How significant is that?
Yeah, that draft tweet 2 days prior that wasn't sent, but it was marked with a stamp that said "President has seen." And in addition to that, there was a text message, an excerpt from a text message they've obtained from a rally organizer to Mike Lindell, the MyPillow CEO, who was, and the message was essentially saying that the president, that Trump, you see it right there, that Trump was going to call, quote unquote, unexpectedly 2 days prior, for his supporters to march to the Capitol. They say they were setting up a second stage there at the Capitol. So, Diane, this is significant in that it presents the first direct evidence that the committee has shown between the rally organizers and the White House and former President Trump that this was planned, that this was not going to be some spontaneous event, that he wanted his supporters to march to the Capitol all along, and that this was being set up in advance.
Now, MaryAlice, we finally heard from former White House counsel Pat Cipollone, and he was, in Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, painted as someone who was constantly trying to warn against what happened. So what stood out to you from his recorded testimony, finally hearing his own firsthand accounts?
Yeah, just to see him there. This was someone, Diane, who was there every step of the way in the White House next to the president. To hear him testify under oath before the committee behind closed doors there that he, too, believed there was no evidence of election fraud, that he was conveying that to the president. I mean, this is exactly the kind of person who would know, who would have the most direct line and insight into any claims of election fraud from the states. This is the White House counsel. And to hear him say that he was telling the president that he thought he should concede, that there was no evidence of election fraud, and then to hear him recount these unbelievable meetings at the White House, to hear that there were, in fact, repeated conversations about whether or not the president could direct or should direct the military to seize voting machines. I mean, this is just not the kind of stuff we ever think about in this country. It is, and that's exactly what we heard Cipollone say, that this seemed wholly un-American, that he felt it was important to try to put a stop to it. It was quite shocking to hear him list just some of the unbelievable ideas that were being floated in that White House.
And Katherine, what about these text messages from former Trump campaign manager Brad Parscale, who characterized Trump's speech on January 6th as, quote, a sitting president asking for a civil war? He went so far as to say he felt guilty for helping Trump win. How significant is that to the case this committee is trying to build, or is that sort of more for just the public to know?
Yeah, look, I think it's significant in the sense that you showed those messages from the former Trump campaign manager, and he's still working for Donald Trump. He's still being paid by Trump's PAC. Trump's website is powered by Brad Parscale's company, for example. But I think what it shows, and those texts were sent on January 6th in the evening, is that everybody around the president, most people around Trump at that time, knew that this was wrong, that what Parscale was saying, that essentially Trump's rhetoric was responsible for somebody dying on the Capitol. And that's what he said in that text message. It just shows more of that building evidence that the committee is trying to show to the public, that nobody really, at the end of the day, who was around him or advising Trump believed that this was okay, whether it be from his rhetoric or from the legal perspective, as you saw from Pat Cipollone.
Katherine, I want to ask how much further this committee needs to go, because at this point they've presented this evidence that Trump and some of his inner circle purposely orchestrated, essentially, this march to the Capitol, wanted his supporters there. We are hearing extremists testifying now that they were motivated to go there and do that from the president's words. How much do they have to show, though, that the president intended for what actually happened, not just for the supporters to show up and protest peacefully outside of the Capitol?
Yeah, I think that's a good question here as they continue to do all of their investigative work. You saw yesterday, and we discussed this a bit, that now they're showing this direct connection between Trump and the rally organizers. Diane, I think one of the outstanding questions, and what the Justice Department has really zeroed in on in their investigation, is that direct connection between Trump, specifically Trump, and those extremist groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. You saw, obviously, the ties to those Trump allies, Michael Flynn and Roger Stone. Does that go further? The one other thing that I think is important to mention, and the committee showed this in the hearing yesterday, without much context, but those 2 phone calls that former Trump advisor Steve Bannon placed to the White House, one in the morning, and then after that phone call to Trump, he then got on his podcast saying all hell was going to break loose the next day, and then he talked to Trump later in the evening. What happened on those calls? What transpired on those calls? Steve Bannon, of course, is set to begin his trial on Monday.
All right, MaryAlice Parks, Katherine Faulders, thank you both.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.